Hey people, John here from Fast Films, and today we're going to go through a 2009 drama romance movie called Undine. In the first scene of the movie, a fisherman named Syracuse is seen out at sea when his net pulls something out of the ordinary. He checks out his net and finds a woman caught inside. He quickly phones it in and helps the woman out of his net. As he tries to resurrect her, she releases a long gasp and wakes up. Moments later, Syracuse takes her into his boat's cabin and suggests calling the doctor. However, the woman loudly tells him not to call the doctor. Syracuse reluctantly agrees and asks after her name. She says she doesn't know. Syracuse introduces himself and continues sailing his boat towards shore. When they reach the shore, Syracuse takes the mysterious woman to his house, gives her a blanket, and leaves shortly. Syracuse gets to his ex-wife, Maura's place to take his daughter, Annie, out. Annie, who had a disease, is carried by her father to a mobile hospital. There, Annie's checked out. After having a sample of her blood taken, she asks her father to tell her a story, which he does. He tells his daughter about a woman that was caught in a fisherman's net, a woman from the sea. The story ends abruptly, and this disappoints Annie. Nonetheless, they finish their session and Annie gets her new motorized wheelchair. Syracuse takes his daughter back to his ex-wife and her husband in her new wheelchair. After being wheeled to his wife's house, Syracuse leaves. After leaving, Syracuse gets to his boat and meets the mystery woman there, singing by the river. He walks towards his boat and rolls it to shore. The mystery woman asks to go with him on his fishing trip, and he reluctantly says yes. On the boat, the woman introduces herself as Undine, and Syracuse marvels at the odd name. When they get to a part of the water, Syracuse pulls out his traps, which catch nothing as usual. He pulls them all up to the boat and heaves a sigh of disappointment. As he's about to pull the penultimate one, Undine starts singing. Upon pulling the penultimate one, he finds a fish in there. Surprisingly, the last one also had some lobster and crab in there. Syracuse marvels at this as he starts connecting his sudden good luck to Undine being there with him. Anyway, he gets some of the fish and puts them in his vehicle to sell them in town. He asks Undine to follow him out to town, but she says no. Syracuse understands and goes to sell his fish alone. After dropping the fish in the cold room, Syracuse gets a dress for Undine at the clothing store. Then he gets to Annie's school and races his daughter home on her wheelchair. Along the way, he tells her about his experience with the mystery woman. After narrating about his good luck earlier during the day, Annie tells her dad the woman's a selkie. Syracuse says nothing and drives home instead. There, he meets Undine, unloads his stuff, and gives her the dress he bought her. Just then, Syracuse asks her how long she planned to stay with him, and she says it all depends on him. Syracuse tells her she could stay forever if she wanted and drives away from the house. Annie, who hasn't seen Undine yet, lurks behind the shadows to spy on her father. In the next scene, Syracuse is seen in church making a confession to a father, telling them about recent events in his life. He tells the father he stole a dress for a woman earlier during the day and gave it to the woman he found on the boat. The father asks about the mystery woman, but Syracuse tells him nothing. That night, Annie reads some books about selkies and oceanic folktales. The next day, Undine tries out some clothes she found in Syracuse's closet. After getting the usual feel from them, she takes a swim in the lake nearby. Unknown to her, Annie was already outside the lake and staring at her. Undine sees Annie and walks out of the lake to meet her. She introduces herself to Annie, who tells her she had a kidney failure and asks her to use her magic powers to heal her. Undine chuckles a bit and walks back inside. Annie keeps talking about the life of a selkie as she follows a surprised Undine into her father's house. After hearing Annie talk about her selkie seal coat and the possibility of Undine falling in love with the landsman, Undine finally grants Annie her attention. In the next scene, Syracuse checks out some books on folklore in the library. The librarian tells him his daughter had been there earlier to learn about selkies. Elsewhere, Annie gets teased a bit by the neighborhood kids. They try to ride her wheelchair on water but don't get it. They leave shortly afterward. Hours later, Annie arrives at her stepfather's house pushing her wet wheelchair. Alex carries her up and dries her wheelchair. Up next, an unknown man is seen near a lighthouse chewing on some food. Meanwhile, Undine has the time of her life on a raft when Syracuse sails by and asks her to come with him to sea. Undine agrees and gets into the boat in no time. While on it, she sings the usual melodies to the water. Syracuse pulls up his trawling and catches loads of fish, even salmon. This surprises Syracuse as he offloads the fish into his boat. As he sorts them out, some fishermen patrol officers pass by and prepare to board Syracuse's ship. Upon boarding, they find the salmon in his catch. After a little bit of interrogation and looking around, they find Undine inside the cabin. To avoid stretching things out, the patrol officers continue their sail. Syracuse and Undine get back to town. This time, Undine shows her face to everyone, including Annie. Syracuse tries to introduce Annie to Undine. However, Annie says she's already met Undine before, and this surprises him. After walking a few meters, Undine, Syracuse, and Annie arrive at a clothing store to get some more clothes for Undine. As Undine tries out the different clothes she could buy, she gets stared at by people of the town. Elsewhere, the unknown man from earlier arrives in town with unknown intentions. Back at Syracuse's home, Undine and Annie discuss Snow White and swimming. When all's been said, Undine decides to take Annie out for a swim in the lake outside. Meanwhile, Syracuse arrives at Mora's and asks for Annie. Mora tells him Annie has already left earlier. Syracuse isn't surprised as he just continues talking to Mora, who accuses him of putting stories in Annie's head. Up next, Undine and Annie enter the freezing lake and swim onto the raft. Before getting on the raft, however, Undine dives into the water to obtain something resembling a bag. Upon taking it out, she and Annie bury it somewhere around Syracuse's backyard. In the next scene, Annie, Syracuse, and Undine get on the water, sailing towards a canoe racing event being hosted in their own town. Upon getting there, Annie rides her wheelchair out of sight and falls off a ramp into the water. Thankfully, Undine and a few other swimmers save her in time. By nightfall, Syracuse takes Annie to her deadbeat mother, Mora. After dropping her there, he takes Undine back to his house. There, Undine inquires about his personal life, and Syracuse tells her all there is to say about himself. At that moment, Mora tells Annie someone was in town looking for Undine. Back at Syracuse's house, he and Undine get into some romance for the night. The next day, Syracuse gets to the same father and has another confession. He tells the father that he's afraid of the recent turn of events because Undine has finally started bringing him hope. The father cheers him up with an oak tree joke as the confession comes to an end. Moments later, outside the church, Syracuse gets interrogated by the unknown man about Undine. However, Syracuse keeps the character and doesn't give him any information about Undine. He gets into his vehicle and drives to meet his daughter in the hospital. After finishing her treatment, they hit the road. Meanwhile, Undine gets a visit from the unknown man. As he parks his car outside, Undine gets up from bed and checks out the man. Upon recognizing him, she rushes out of the house to hide in a small tent in the backyard. The man approaches the house and signals another man who was on the boat to come on shore. Undine rushes out of the tent to run further into the bushes. Elsewhere, Syracuse is seen at a bar with Mora and her husband drinking and playing 8-ball as usual. Mora makes fun of Syracuse having a water baby named Undine. Syracuse asks her to take care of Annie while he's away, and she agrees. Syracuse eventually gets to his home only to find it all trashed up. His mind immediately flashes to Undine as he goes looking for her. Fortunately, he finds her by the stream and joins her in a discussion. Now together, Undine tells him someone was in town looking for her and that she was worried. Syracuse tries to calm her down and tells her she could stay if she wanted to. In another scene, a drunk Mora drives herself, Alex, and Annie back home. Unfortunately for the trio, Mora gets them into a road accident. Syracuse and Undine are seen riding along that part of town when they hear the sirens. Syracuse quickly rushes out of his car to see his daughter. Luckily for Syracuse, Annie wakes up a few hours later in the hospital and is wheeled into an operating room. Syracuse asks the doctors what was up, and he told them that they found a tissue match for a kidney transplant. Syracuse leaves Undine to watch over his daughter. Undine's partner, Vladik, approaches Undine in the hospital. Getting to her, Vladik discusses leaving the town to Undine, but she says no. The next day, Alex's ashes are dispersed into the ocean by Mora on a ferry. After scattering the ashes into the water, Mora discusses with Syracuse about Alex and tells him to take care of Annie till she gets better. After the funeral service, Syracuse and Mora both have a drink at the bar. While at it, Mora tells Syracuse to get rid of Undine as she was bringing bad luck to all of them. Syracuse walks out of the bar, gets to his boat, and sails it to an island with Undine on it. On the way, Syracuse asks Undine to tell him about Vladik. She tells him the little she can as they approach the island. Upon getting there, Syracuse forced her out of the boat and keeps her on the island, leaving a little while later. Before he leaves, however, Undine asks him to at least let her say goodbye to Annie. Unfortunately, Syracuse ignores her. By nightfall, Undine takes a dip in the water as the scene ends. The next morning, Syracuse is found on a tree by the father he is confessing to. He tells Syracuse to bring himself down, which he does. Then they both walk home and discuss the recent turn of events. That evening, Annie's carried back home from the hospital. On the way to their front porch, she notices her dad crying and asks him about Ondine. Syracuse tells her she left them. Syracuse wakes up by 1 a.m. the next day. While he prepares for his day, Annie, who is watching TV, listens to a channel playing Ondine's song. This jolts Syracuse back to reality as he gets back on his boat and leaves town for the island. After getting on the island, he's seen Ondine's clothes on the shore. He then looks across a small lake and sees a shipwreck. He sails his boat to the wreck and sees Ondine. Now back together, Syracuse removes his coat and covers Ondine. Before leaving the island, though, he asks Ondine to tell him the truth of her origins. Ondine tells him that she was a prisoner and a drug mule from Romania. Apparently, she was thrown off a boat with a bag of substances when the Coast Guard caught up to her and her comrade, Vladik, and she swam till she got tired. Thankfully, Syracuse's net caught her before the water could take her out. After the story, she tells Syracuse her real name is Joanna. As the duo approach land, Syracuse notices something weird upon getting off the boat and into his house. Syracuse and Ondine are attacked by a drug baron who was identified as the unknown man earlier and his henchmen. They demand the bag of substances Ondine swam away with, and she promises to show them where she buried it if they leave Annie and Syracuse alone. Upon getting to the location they buried the bag previously, they didn't find it. This annoys the men as they blackmail Ondine even more. Ondine then asks Annie if she moved it, and she says yes. Annie tells Ondine she moved the pot to the lobster pot. Ondine then moves them all to the lobster pot and pushes the men into the water when she has the chance. Moments later, Ondine, Syracuse, and Annie are rescued. Ondine, however, is taken to the police station where she faces the judge who rules that she is going to be deported since she wasn't married to anybody in the country. Syracuse tells the father that he'd like to marry her, and he gives him his blessing. A couple of days later, Ondine and Syracuse both get married on Syracuse's fishing boat. The movie ends as Syracuse and Ondine ride around town with little Annie as their sailor. Thanks for watching, guys.